close to that time, what's going to be your last words? Last thing you're going to say. What do you think that would be? You got one last chance to say something. Better be important, right? What's the last thing you're going to maybe tell your loved ones or tell someone?
Do not ever skip a meal.
What's that?
Do not ever skip a meal.
Never skip a meal. Yeah. No regrets. Never skip leg day. Okay, so think about it this way.
Dessert first, because you never know when you're going to die.
Ah, yeah, you never know when Jesus is coming back, so eat dessert first. Okay, very good. Wise words, right? Often. Okay, so think about it a little bit more morbidly. When someone is on death row and is going to be executed, that's kind of a common thing. Is they ask them, what's the final things that you want? They'll give them a last meal, and then they typically ask them, "Do you have any final words?" And sometimes the person does and has something profound to say, and sometimes they don't. But you think about that. Like if you only have one thing to leave behind or to say, you're probably going to say something or be thinking about something about what's most important to you. So this question kind of get our minds rolling here a little bit. A further question, okay? What's the best way for someone to show love? Big question. What's the best way to show love? Yes, Max?
To get giving up your life for someone. Like if a kid's standing in the middle of a road and a car's coming, and you go and jump out and get the kid out of the way, but you end up having to go, that would be the highest amount of love given.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to? That's a great way to put it, Max. Anybody else want to phrase it differently or have a different thought? Greatest way to show love. Let me go with Chase. Sorry.
Just like broader what Max said, just some sacrifice.
Okay, sacrifice. All right. What are you gonna say, Abby? Abby was gonna say sacrifice. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that because hopefully it means we're somewhat on the same page there. And you think about sacrifice, okay? We think even like giving your life, and we realize that Jesus Christ showed the greatest expression of love through his sacrifice of himself. Okay, but it's not showing love. Is not just in that ultimate form of sacrifice. But that word sacrifice plays into it because to show love, you have to give. Or another way to say it would be to show love, you have to serve. And by serving, you give of yourself. You sacrifice. That is showing love. Because you're giving up something in some way, shape, or form. So here's what I want to do. I want to actually just read a small portion of the passage tonight. And then we'll start back at the beginning and we'll work our way through it. Maybe I have one person read these few verses and stand and read them nice and loud, and we'll all follow along. Someone want to read a couple of verses here? Oh, Morgan. Oh, I saw her again. All right, Morgan, could you mind standing? Because I already said that. And can you start so we're in John chapter 13. Can you start in verse 12 and read through verse 15? So chapter 13, verses 12 through 15. Let's all follow along.
So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you. Yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, that's already the explanation that's given. Okay, so we've already looked at the explanation. Now we're going to back up and realize where we're at in the passage. And we have to remember, just by way of introduction and explanation, that the Gospel of John, he's not always chronological and he jumps around a little bit. So if you recall, it's been a couple weeks ago now, but in chapter 12, it was still a week before before Jesus' crucifixion. Okay, so John has just fast forwarded up until this is the Last Supper that we are at. And so this is right before Jesus' crucifixion. So John has actually skipped a couple of days. He doesn't include every detail. Okay, so we're at the Last Supper is the setting, but John wants to focus. He's not so much about the chronology of the crucifixion and the Passion Week. John is focused on Jesus' heart and Jesus' message. Okay? So, here we go. Let's pick up in chapter 13 and verse 1. And it tells us the setting here. Let's read the first couple of verses here. It says, "Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God." Actually, we'll pause there because then it's like one big sentence. So that's the setting. Okay, is here at the Last Supper. And we're talking about this aspect of sacrifice, of showing love, and even of that idea of a final message. Think about this. As Jesus is hours from the cross, he's hours from the Garden of Gethsemane, and everything that comes along with that, which Pastor has, where he's at in Mark, has helped set us up well. And we're backed up here just a little bit. So all of that is coming, and Jesus knows that his time is limited. He has the short amount of time to invest in his disciples and to teach them. It's just his disciples. It's one last time. And so what's his message? It's his message of giving sacrificially and showing love. And that's this last message of all the things that Jesus has to say. This is where he wants to start. This is what he wants the disciples to remember. So, the first thing that you see here, and the verses that we've read here, this first couple of verses, is John points out Jesus' heart of sacrificial love. Okay, the heart behind it. Okay, because he knows that the crucifixion is coming. Okay, but it says that as this is coming, Jesus knows that his hour was come. In verse 1, he knows that his hour was come to depart out of this world unto the Father. Okay, and then down in verse 3, it says Jesus knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God. So I put it like this, is that as Jesus is approaching the cross and he has his final time with his disciples, he rests in God the Father's plan and in God the Father's power. Jesus knows what's happening. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows what's coming. But it's almost like the crucifixion isn't even on his mind here in some regard. Now it is. But Jesus rests in the Father's knowledge, the Father's power, and the Father's will, and that everything is in his control. And so what is he going to do with his final time? Is he's going to teach his disciples in a very, very, very vivid way. So as Jesus rests in God's plan and God's power, then he is then able to focus on the disciples. Okay? So Jesus, his awareness of God's working helped him focus on the disciples. So then John points out that Jesus, in this last little time that he has with them, Jesus is going to focus on the disciples. Now I want you to notice, look back down at verse 1. It says that Jesus, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And so you can think about it like this, is that Jesus, with this time that he has, he's investing in his disciples and he's going to teach them all the way up until the end. All the way up until he has no time left. Teaching them to the fullest. There's different ways that you could look at that. But Jesus is investing and he's teaching his disciples until he has no time left. So I think that's the first thing that I think John wants us to see here, is that the point right here is that even with the impending doom of the cross and all the horror that's going to come with that, Jesus is concentrated on teaching his disciples about love and demonstrating love to his disciples. That's what he's focused on. I don't know about you, but I knew the time, a horrible time leading up to my death was coming. I don't know who all I would be thinking about at that time. I would probably selfishly focus on myself. I don't know that I'd be thinking very much about others. But Jesus is thinking about his disciples because he loves them, and so he wants to teach them about love. So he has a heart of sacrificial love, and then so he's going to show a demonstration of sacrificial love. So we ended in verse 3 here, Jesus resting in the Father's will. So what does he do? Start with me in verse 4. He riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. So, let's pause there. I think we probably all realize, maybe you don't realize this, but this whole idea of washing feet in that culture was the job for the lowest servant in the house. And so you think about even in this culture, for the Jews, if a wealthy family, they had different types of servants and slaves. There was Jews and there was Gentile servants or slaves in that house. It would not be the Jews who are washing feet. That would get relegated down to the Gentile servant. Hopefully that puts it a little bit into context here. And if you think about this, it's just Jesus and his disciples here in the upper room. There does not seem to be any servants present. The disciples' feet haven't been washed. So that's actually the whole thing of coming on all the rituals that go along with the Passover. You would take a bath to get ready for the Passover. But then, you go from the bath back to your you're the disciples, you're in the upper room, or you're going back to your home or wherever. You've walked from the bath, and everything's dirt there. Everything's dirt and stone. So even though you've bathed yourself, your feet are still dirty. So there's still that foot washing that needs to happen. So it would seem that the disciples have all prepared for this supper, and there's nobody there to wash their feet. And so the feet don't get washed. None of the disciples are washing the feet. So then what does Jesus do? Jesus gets up, and he actually makes he's very methodical. I don't know if you notice that. Like John takes all this time. He takes all of verses 4 and 5 to walk through Jesus very methodically preparing to and then washing the disciples' feet. And so what do we have here? We have God, Jesus, the creator of the universe. And he's the one who's relegating himself to the lowest on the totem pole's job. And he's very methodical. I think the reason that Jesus does that is that he wants the disciples to be wondering, to be thinking. As this is happening, as he's doing this, as he's going through these steps, he wants the disciples to be pondering this. Be thinking, here's our master, here's God, here's the Messiah. He's doing the lowest servant's job. So, why does Jesus do this? Why does he take the lowest servant's job? Well, let me pose that to you. I'll ask you that. Why do you think Jesus takes the lowest servant's job? Yes, Max?
He's trying to show that he's selfless and is thinking about other people before, and that he's the ultimate servant that's taking all of our sin.
Okay, that's good, because that we will get to that in a moment. Yes, I think anybody want to add anything to what Max said? Keep us moving along. I'd agree with you, Max. I believe in Jesus, even if he's going to make that point as Morgan read for us. Why does Jesus do this? Because he wants them to see the highest person, the highest being in the universe, putting himself down as low as he can go. And he wants it to be a very visual teaching. He's visually teaching the disciples. Now, here's a couple things, and here's where we'll move into, we'll continue reading here. is that, well, let's read the verses and then we'll sum it up, make the point here. Okay, so as he's washing the disciples' feet, and he's going around to each one, he's washing their feet. Look at verse 6. It said, Then cometh he to Simon Peter. And Peter saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do, thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. And I think he's very noble in what he says here, because then verse 8, Peter said unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. So again, that draws us back to the disciples realize Jesus is taking the job that none of us took. And Peter's saying, okay, this can't happen. This isn't supposed to be happening like this. You're the Messiah. I believe you're God. This isn't your job. You shouldn't be doing this. Okay, so, and I think Peter, he has good intentions, okay? He has good intentions, but he's speaking ignorantly here. And here's how I put this, is that as Jesus is doing the lowest servant's job, and he's serving, the disciples are not understanding this right now. And so Jesus is serving the ignorant. And that's really what Peter speaks nobly here, but he speaks ignorantly, because he's not understanding what's going on. So Jesus, he serves the ignorant. So he's trying to make a point here. And Peter protests, what are you doing? And Jesus says, you'll understand later. And Peter says, no, you're not going to wash my feet. And look at how Jesus replies then. So verse 8, Peter said unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter said unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Peter says, well, if that's the case, what you said, if you don't wash my feet, I have no part of you. Well, then wash all of me. I need a whole bath. And so again, that's not the point that Jesus is trying to make here. And so Peter's missing it a little bit, right? So we'll come to Jesus' explanation here in a moment. But I want to again make it a little bit of a side note here. Is that as Jesus is doing the lowest servant's job, he's serving the ignorant, then he's also serving the enemy. Because John has already pointed out to us, if you go back to verse 2, it says, And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Judas has already decided. He's fallen to that temptation of Satan. And he's already decided to betray Jesus. And Judas knows it, and Jesus knows it. And Jesus is going to say it here in a moment. And so it's like Judas knows, he knows what he's done. And Jesus knows. And Judas knows that Jesus knows. And it's like there's, again, this is where I wish you could see we could see it. And see the looks that pass back and forth between them. And again, here's Jesus. And not only is he doing it, not only is he serving in the lowest form possible, but he's serving somebody who is betraying him, and someone who's going to send him to the cross. Now, the larger spiritual meaning here, connected to what Jesus says in verse 8, there's the points. Verse 8 and verse 10, where Jesus says, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. And Peter says, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Verse 10, Jesus said unto him, He that is washed needs not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, or he's entirely clean. Ye are clean, but not all. And that's there again, talking about Judas. Verse 11, For he knew who should betray him, therefore he said, You're not clean. So the larger, there's the aspect of serving by love, in which Jesus is going to tell them what he's doing this for. Okay? But there is a larger spiritual meaning, and that's that interaction with Peter, where Jesus is saying, as he's practically serving and showing sacrifice here. But think about this, he's going to the cross, and so he's about to spiritually sacrifice everything. Okay? He's going to pay that, what we call that ultimate price of giving his life. So for the disciples, he's about to serve mankind in the greatest way possible. And each disciple, every person, has to accept that and put their trust in that sacrifice. And that's why he says, if I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. So, he's put on this very visual display, this demonstration of sacrificial love. And then he's actually going to teach it. He's going to tell them what he just did. And these are the verses that Morgan read. So look at verse 12. Let's follow back down through those again. It says, so after he had washed their feet and taken his garments and was set down again, so there's a little bit of a pause there as he finishes all this up, and he sits back down and he's put the water basin away. He's kind of cleaned up a little bit, and now he sits back down with them. There's still all this, like, Jesus just did the servant's job. And then he sits down again. He's letting them mull this over. So verse 12, he said unto them, know ye what I have done to you? So you realize what I'm doing. It says, ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say well, for so I am. So Jesus explains his actions of a servant. Why did he do the lowest servant's job? He says, ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. His point is that God took the lowest status. And so what are believers supposed to do? What are the disciples supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? If we're going to show love, is that believers, Jesus' whole point here is that believers should serve and love, following Jesus' example. He says, if I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you. So Jesus did this the whole reason he washed their feet, so this is something they would remember. And so he says, if the highest being in the universe puts himself down at the lowest point and takes the lowest status, then how can any of us who profess to be followers of Christ, and we are so much lower and more unholy than God himself, it's not that much farther for us to go down and take the lowest job and serve in the lowest fashion possible. If the creator of the universe can come all the way from up here to all the way down here, then where can we? It's not that far for us to go from here to here. It shouldn't be that much of a move for us. And why does this have to be taught? Why does Jesus have to teach like that? Because as sinful, prideful people, we take ourselves, and where we should be way down here, we want to put ourselves way up here. And Jesus' point is, we are already down here. And so we should live like we're down here. We should live as that lowest servant status. Here's the next thing that he says. In verse 16, he says, verily, verily, I say unto you, or most assuredly, I'm telling you this. He says, the servant is not greater than his Lord. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Servant's not higher than his boss. Neither is he that is sent greater than he that sent him. Okay, the person who's carrying the message, the person who's told what to do, is not greater than the person that sent him. So what's his point in saying that? Why does he reiterate it this way? I put it like this. Is that Jesus' point for his disciples is he wants every single one of his disciples, and therefore all of us, to make this point personal for ourselves, is that I need to love others, and I love by serving, and I serve in any way possible. Every follower of Christ is to be a servant. Jesus has one last point here that we'll look at. Is what happens? What happens when we serve? What happens when we look to whoever it is that we interact with? Whether it's our family, our friends, or people in our school, or people in our church, even down to the cashier behind the desk, whatever. The librarian. I was at the library today. That's why that comes to mind. What happens when we seek to show love and therefore serve wherever we can? What happens when we do that, when we seek to do that? We haven't read verse 17 yet, and Jesus makes this very, very simple statement. He says, if ye know these things, happy are ye if you do them. I'll put it like this, is that sacrificial love brings joy. Why is that? Why is this truth that Jesus gives? That sacrificial love brings joy. Why does serving in love bring true, lasting happiness? And we could spend some time talking about this, but time is starting to run away on us. So to keep us moving along, I put it like this. Sacrificial love brings joy because when we're serving in love, we're fulfilling our purpose as God has created us. And that my purpose as a Christian is to glorify God. Your purpose as a Christian is to glorify God, to point others to God. So when you serve in love, you seek to love others, you're doing what you were created to do. That's that sense of fulfillment that everybody's looking for, and that we're supposed to find. So, all right, we need to be done. Well, how does this play out then? Okay, because we don't wash feet today. Thank God. Praise the Lord for that. Washing feet, not a part of our culture. Washing each other's feet. Okay. So, how do we take this? How does this play out into your life today, this evening, tomorrow? That's my question that I want us to think about and answer as we wrap up here. Because is Jesus' point just, always do the dirty job, always scrub the toilet? That's not his point, right? Hopefully we can see that. So, how do you serve and love the people around you? I'm looking for some feedback here. Oh, David?
I like sacrificing time for them.
Ooh. Nice broad application there. I love it. Sacrificing your time for them. Yeah, whenever you are seeking to show God to someone, whether it's your parent, or your sibling, or someone in the youth group, kid at school, you have to give up your time to do that. That's good. That's good. Yes, Max?
Like giving up your joys for someone else's joys. Like letting your little brother play a video game, or like giving up things that you enjoy so someone else can enjoy.
Yes, little brother point there. Can little brothers be annoying?
Very.
Amen.
Wait. Oh, he's saying so.
Is there?
Yeah. All right, let's get a couple more here. Now we got hands. People are starting. That's good. Okay, let's work our way down the line. Jacob.
So, regardless of whether someone else volunteers to do a task, or just anything, you should be always willing to volunteer yourself to do something.
Yes. Okay. Morgan.
Loving them enough to tell them the truth.
Ooh, okay. Say that again really loud, Morgan. That was a good one.
Loving them enough to tell them the truth, even if it hurts them.
Think about that. Okay, here, let me throw this. Let's kind of create a little scenario here. Okay. You have a friend. Follow me here, okay? You have a friend. Okay, they're a Christian, and there's something in their life, maybe it's something that they just said, or someone they're treating somewhere else, and there's something in their life that is displeasing to God, aka sin. You realize that you are serving in love when you take that friend aside and say, we shouldn't talk about that. That doesn't please God. Gossip's an easy one. Okay, look, stop. We shouldn't be talking that way about that person. We should stop that right now. That's tough. If you put it in that scenario, you gotta, there's some sacrifices going on there. You're putting the spotlight on yourself. You're exposing yourself, right? There's all these different aspects of sacrifice that are going on there. There's a lot of different ways that we could apply this. And there's a lot of different things, I think, a lot of different scenarios that we could talk about. But think about that when you go home tonight. You have opportunities all the time to show Christ's love to your parents, to your siblings. How many of you are you on Zoom meetings with other students right now? Or is it just like you're watching it? Oh, some of you are on. Okay. How many of you are you still have friends to interact with outside of church? Like you still have school friends to interact with?
No.
Oh, nobody thinks. Kind of, sort of.
I mean, I kind of did, but he let go of himself.
Okay.
Because he
All
was
right.
down with the trigger.
My point. All right, here we go. We gotta close it down here. Here we go. Look this way. My point being is that we are called by Christ. He demonstrated this for his disciples and for us. And this is his final message that he's going to start things off with here. It's this very visual display to teach us so that we remember, and so as disciples remember, that we are called to love others, and we do that by serving. And so we should be willing to serve in the lowest form possible. So, we gotta be done. Let me segue that in then to final announcement. Okay, we want to talk about the snack here this Sunday night. Okay, so it's after the evening service. Marshall, you can close it down if you want to.